Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. In this video I'll be giving you guys a final summer update of the polytunnel here. So it's now currently the 24th of September. The sunlight's really starting to fade here in North Scotland. It's already past the equinox and the temperatures have really started to drop. So a lot of the plants here are dying off, starting to look a bit rough. So it's not going to be the nicest looking update that I've done. I mean, I've really missed the peak. The peak would have been probably end of August or towards the middle of August, but I was away for that, so I didn't get to film that. But I'll give you a tour of what everything looks like now. As I say, a lot of things are starting to die back, either because they've just got too tired as they've been going on for several months, or because the weather now is starting to get a bit cooler and they're just starting to give up. So starting here, we've already got some winter crops starting to get germinated. So these are the spinach. What's going to happen is my parents are going to fill the polytunnel with winter crops. Because of the thermal store heating system I've got here, we can keep the temperature hopefully above frost for most of the summer, sorry, most of the winter, and we should be able to grow lettuce, maybe some brassicas, but also things like spinach and rocket. They should grow quite well in here over winter. So I'll show you a couple of the things they've harvested already that are still left. You see some butternut squash here, absolutely giant. This one in particular is a really long butternut squash. You can see it weighs an absolute ton. I haven't weighed these, but you know, they're several kilograms, probably at least 4 or 5 kilograms or something, really heavy. And this variety is quite nice. The whole neck of this one here is completely solid flesh, and there's just a tiny little cavity at the bottom, so they're really good amount of fruit and not much wasted space. It's interesting that it's the same variety, but they're really quite a big difference you can see in the shape of them. And I'll show you a couple of the ones that we've got growing here. So this is in the tomato patch, but because the butternut squash has spread so much, we've got a nice one down here. You can see it's a good size and it's still growing. It's almost a finished growing, but it's got a bit more ripening to do before it can be harvested. So coming through to the centre of the polytunnel, you can see the peppers here. They've done quite well for my parents this year. They've had a good crop of peppers. For some reason this one's died off already. I'm not sure why that one's decided to die, but they're looking a bit sickly now. And most of the peppers have been harvested, but this one at the end doing particularly well still. You can see it's got quite a lot of young fruit still fattening up, and it's got an absolutely enormous giant one down here. You can see if I can get the leaves out of the way and get you a better shot of that. You can see absolutely huge, and I'm 6'5", so you know my hands are quite large, so that's way bigger than your average one. Actually that's about 2 or 3 times the size of the ones we get in the shop quite often. And it's nearly ripe. You can see there's still a bit of kind of like darker patches. They'll turn bright red when it's finished, so that's probably ripe in a few days time. But there's plenty of other ones on here, and you can see there's one lower down. So it's done really well, the pepper plants. Parents said they've harvested many peppers this year. So going around the left here, we've got the strawberry patch, which has grown really well, but hasn't had any strawberries for a while because it's the wrong time of year now. It was really the early summer. You see another butternut squash on the ground there. I think it looks like we've got some pak choy or some kind of like something like that for the winter crop again coming along. We've got some beetroot down there. This is one of the butternut squash plants. This is the one that has the fruit down here, but also the fruit I showed you that's over in that section down there. So coming along, we've got the sweet corn. They've not done too well again this year. I think the problem is they get a bit tall, they touch the top, and the male parts of the flowers get really wet. And what that does is the pollen gets too sticky, and the pollen doesn't really fall onto the cobs down here and pollinate it properly. So we got loads of cobs, but I think they might have an issue again with pollination. We'll just have to wait and see. Still wait a few more weeks until they're fully ripened. But there's a lot, you know, we're getting 2 or 3 cobs on every joint here, so that if they do ripen, we're going to have a huge amount of sweet corn. And you can see even some of the ones down here, you've got maybe up to 5 or 6 cobs on each joint, so there's going to be a huge amount of sweet corn if it does ripen up. So further down here we've got another butternut squash. As I say, there's a lot of butternut squash at the moment because that's one of the later ripening plants. And another one down there again. So coming around, this is, as I say, the sweet corn patch. More butternut squash plants. There was some chili in here, but for some reason the chili just kind of died off. We've had a lot of humidity problems in this polytunnel, and it went mouldy. A lot of other plants got mouldy and died. You can see it's just got a little bit of growth at the bottom there. So hopefully next year they'll have more success with that. Got some tomatoes here which have really started to go over, but you can see there are some tomatoes still ripening on it. But it's pretty much finished, to be honest. It's further round, got some leftover red cabbage and some beetroot as well. See little beetroot plants, they're still quite young, so they're not ready for harvesting yet. Around here we've got some more bell peppers again. So around here we've got the San Marzano tomatoes. They did quite well, but the problem with them is they really had some issues with kind of a lot of scab forming on some of them. And also they're just kind of looking a bit sickly at the moment. It is the end of the year, so they're dying off now. So in this section we've got some more lettuce and winter crops. And we got my Nicandrophytes phalloides, or also known as souffle plant. Parents keep cutting this back because it's been getting too big really. But you can see the stem, how big it was originally. It was absolutely huge. I've never seen one this big before, but it's because it's been in the polytunnel. Great growing conditions for it. And it has lovely little flowers. They're closed at the moment because it's not too sunny. But they are quite nice, pretty flowers when they are open. The one outside, incidentally, has stayed very small still. And we've got these nice little parcels that you can have for like flower arranging and maybe pot purees or something that looks nice. So further along, let's say we've got, this is the main patch of butternut squash. You can see down in this section, got a very round one, looks almost like a pumpkin. I'm not sure why that one's gone so round. Another young one forming just down there. We've got the cobra beans, but they've all gone over now. You know, there's a few beans hanging off them here and there, dotted around, but you can see again the mould and botrytis that started to form in some of the plants. And that's just with it being quite humid. And the last half of the winter has been really wet and a lot of rain, and that's really caused a lot of issues with humidity because they haven't been able to have the doors open as much as they would like. So here's the main patch of butternut squash. Again, you can see some more growing on the plant. My parents have had probably 20 plus fruits already harvested from this, so it's been a really good year, and there's several more to crop. You can see down there again. Another one on the way. This section's bare at the moment. There's a lot of things have been taken out because they've died off and it's the end of the year. But coming around here we've got the sweet potatoes, which are doing quite well. They've really spread quite far. In fact, you can see they're just planted on this small framework down here. But we have got one right down there at the end of the polytunnel, probably a good 4 or 5 meters away from the centre of the plant. So it's grown a lot, it's still growing really vigorously. So we're hoping for a good crop. We don't know yet how good the crop's going to be. We'll just have to wait until the foliage dies off in October, November, dig up the roots and see how many sweet potatoes we have. So going to the middle section, this end, this tomatoes variety has done really well. Can't remember which this one is. I think the label's been misplaced, but they're basically like a small cherry plum tomato that's yellow in colour. You can see, we can see them there starting to ripen up, and there's a couple further back there which are actually ripe and they're starting to go yellow. So these have done really well. They've cropped really heavily. We didn't have our favourite variety, which was Sun Gold, this year because we just used a mixed packet of seeds. But next year we're hopefully going to grow some better varieties, because apart from this one here, which has done really well, although hasn't been trained recently. It was trained up to the metal poles and then let to grow wild. So that's why it's growing so crazy. You can see it's got to quite a size. These were planted, I think, in February from seed. So quite impressive growth from them, and plenty of cropping on these as well. But as I say, the other ones, varieties haven't done as well. You can see still plenty of tomatoes to come, a lot of green ones, and they're going to ripen soon. There's still enough heat in the polytunnel, enough light to ripen them a bit further. So further along, these are the other varieties of tomatoes. You can see they're pretty much finished. They've still got a bit of growth on the top, but it's quite weak. In fact, a lot of the flowers are starting to become mouldy because the humidity is too high, so there's not going to be much more cropping from these. These were the Tigerella tomatoes. They haven't done as well in this polytunnel as the others. Same with this one over here. But as I say, we have had really good crops from them. It's just that they've kind of come to the end of the year right now, whereas the yellow plum cherries have somehow managed to keep growing through the cooler months. Now again, you can see kind of botrytis starting to kill that one with all the mould on it. But you can see the stems that have survived, they've still got a good crop, and these are going to ripen up in the next few weeks. So there's been a really good crop of tomatoes. My parents have absolutely filled their freezer with all the tomatoes, and this one's orange berry. It's a variety, and you can see it looks quite sickly, but there's a lot of tomatoes on it, and these will finish to ripen up in a few weeks time. Down here we've got some basil. There was a lot more basil, but as I say, humidity killed a lot of it off. And we've got a small aubergine plant down here. For some reason the aubergines never really came to anything. Might be too shady in this position, I'm not sure. But I'll take you now to the polytunnel, sorry, the greenhouse, where there's There's quite a few more aubergines and a few other tomatoes and plants like that. So just as I was leaving the polytunnel, I forgot there was a couple more plants that I need to do an update on, and that's the cucumber here. Apparently they've been getting about 2 or 3 cucumbers every week for most of the summer. You can see it is starting to look a bit tired now. It did cover this whole mesh at one point, but a big section of it got mouldy and died off, and that was this section down here. And that's where you can see there's a lot of kind of old stems without any leaves or anything. But it's continued to grow, and you can see this section up here is growing right up to the top of the polytunnel. And it is kind of in a stage of dying back more than it's actually growing at the moment, but it's still producing quite a decent crop of cucumbers despite this. So you can see there's a cucumber there. I think my parents may be getting about 1 a week at the moment instead of the 2 or 3 that they were getting originally, but certainly still doing not too bad. Still got flowers coming out on it. Still got new fruit forming, so they'll probably get a few more weeks of that as long as they're not any really early frost. But as I say, the frost shouldn't affect us until later in the year. The thermal store at the moment is actually about 15-16 degrees, so it's got plenty of warmth in it. So we shouldn't get any frost for at least another month or 2. And the final plant I was going to do an update on was the sweet peas over here. These did amazing at the beginning of summer, and in midsummer they were doing quite well. They did grow right up to the top of the polytunnel there, and they were cut back quite hard, you can see, to about this level. And they are kind of in the state of dying back now. There's a bit of a powdery mildew. They're really getting a bit old, these plants. You can see they're really getting quite tired out, dying back, but they're still producing a fair number of flowers. You know, probably getting a good handful of flowers a day, not like the 30 to 50 bunches they were getting at the height of the season, but it's still growing. It's definitely dying back though, and we'll need to plant some new seeds for next year's crop. We'll probably also need to transplant it to a different part of the polytunnel. These have been growing 2 times in a row in the same ground for the last 2 years, so we'll probably need a new crop in a new section of the polytunnel, but they've done well as well. As I say, everything's just starting to die back now and look a bit sickly. Just a few things like the sweet potatoes and also the butternut squash, which are still growing quite vigorously. Actually, this butternut squash plant was much bigger than this. It was covering pretty much the whole half of the polytunnel right across the path. My parents have cut off all these stems. You can see a lot of the cut marks where the stems have been cut off just to keep it smaller. But as you can still see, it's putting out some really strong, vigorous growth. Strong growth, it's still got lots of little flowers starting to form, and as you saw earlier, there's plenty of new fruits starting to appear, lots of flowers. And despite this being a really old plant, you know, this plant has been growing since February now, since I sowed the seeds. It's still growing quite well, so I'm really impressed with this variety, and we're definitely going to be growing this variety again next year. So here we are now in the greenhouse. The greenhouse doesn't do quite as well, it doesn't have a ventilation system like the polytunnel. But the conditions are quite different in here. The conditions are much drier, it doesn't have the same humidity, and it gets a lot hotter in the day and a lot colder at night, so it does better for more kind of Mediterranean plants that like bigger, the less tropical, more kind of Mediterranean climates, so drier but hotter in the day, colder at night. So you can see here we've got some tomatoes which are dying off. They still have gone mouldy. I need to look it up more carefully in the book if it's just botrytis or if it's actually some kind of tomato blight. Then for next year we know we can get some more resistant varieties. But you can see there's still plenty of tomatoes ripening up in here, and they're picking them every day, so still getting a really good harvest. Courgettes here have kind of started to slow down, but they've had a moderate harvest this year. Same problems as the previous years where they're not pollinating enough, I think, with it being inside a greenhouse. So I think next year we'll have to get some varieties which are self-pollinating, so they're going to guarantee to get a better crop. But you can still see there's a few growing down there, so they're not doing too bad still. Further along we did have a lot of aubergines in this patch, but none of them pollinated either, which was a real shame, even with manual pollination, so we didn't get any aubergines this year. See, this is a decent sized plant, but as you can tell from the mottling on the foliage here, has actually got red spider mite, so that's weakening it now. So even with its good size and its flowers, I don't think this is going to really produce anything now, because the cooler weather and the red spider mite will most likely finish it off. So we've replaced the other plants that are in here with some more winter salad crops, so they'll grow over autumn and winter. The lemon verbena's gone absolutely crazy this year. You can see it's growing into quite a thicket of branches. My mum keeps cutting it back, keeps using it, but it's just so vigorous and grows so well that it just keeps growing up. So I'll probably cut it really hard right down to the ground again this winter, just to keep it under control. My cycad here, it's been another year where it hasn't grown. It really is a bit too poor the climate here in Scotland to get it growing every single year. It doesn't have really strong sunshine it needs. But it grows maybe every 2 or 3 years. So this year there's no growth, but hopefully next year we'll get some more fronds starting to grow from it. So further around we've got a lot of tomato plants, but as you can see they've really just died off. It's the wrong time of year for them. There's a few cherry tomatoes still ripening up, and this one's not doing too bad. You can see that it's got a bit of decent growth on it, and it's got a lot of tomatoes actually, a huge number of tomatoes still hanging off it. So that one's going to do well, but as I say, the other ones have really started to go mouldy and die off. So lastly, there was an amazing sunflower that we had here that went through that gap in the glass there. It was absolutely huge, probably about 3 or 4 meters tall. It was cut down recently because it was finished flowering and started to die off, but I can show you the stem which was here. As you can see, it's an absolute tree trunk. Get my hand for comparison. You know, my dad had to use some loppers on that, it was so solid, secateurs wouldn't cut that. So yeah, it was a really big, impressive sunflower. And I'll leave you now with actually some pictures of the other sunflowers in the garden, so you can see the nice multi-stem ones that have grown. And they were actually all self-seeded. They've just been popping up around the garden ever since I planted a few from a packet a few years back. What I did is I planted a mixture of multi-branched ones and single-stemmed sunflowers, and also some orange and red sunflowers. They're just kind of all interbred, and they've just been popping up lots of interesting little kind of hybrids ever since. So I'll show you a selection of them.